you doing?
Call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is a special call meeting to discuss House Bill 581. This is our second public hearing regarding this bill. Please let the record reflect we do have a quorum present. We're missing Mr. Boyce,
Ms. Brown.
and Ms. Brown. And I think Ms. Brown is going to be here in just a little bit anyway. That being said, I think the only item of business is this House bill. I'm going to pass it to Logan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to get through this as reasonably quick as I can. House Bill 581, as you know, was signed into law last year, and it proffered a constitutional amendment referendum that passed our jurisdiction with a little over 60% of the vote, I believe. But it's a very complicated bill. This is one that places caps or limits on the assessed value of the homesteaded parcels that we have. In the city of Monroe right now, we have 1,933 eligible homesteaded parcels by last count from the tax commissioner or tax assessor, and only about 1,700 and some odd are actually in place. I don't know what the discrepancy there is, but that's the report from the tax assessor. But anyway, property values will then be tied to a something like a consumer price index, CPI, that is the general tool used to track inflation. And so let's say that there's a 3% inflationary target. We would have to cap all assessments, and I say we, the county appraisal department, will cap all assessments of homesteaded parcels at a 3% maximum. But if there is like a CPI of a 1.5 or 1.8%, it would then lower down to just that target amount of, let's say, 1.8%. So the bill also allows for a possible FLOSS, the floating local option sales tax, as a means of recouping the revenue lost by these value limitations. And again, this would have to be approved by the voters. So one of the things that a lot of people don't find clear is that when the referendum took place last November, it did not automatically bind the FLOSS. So because it approved, now local governments either opt in or out, and then you would have to hold another referendum to approve the sales tax replacement. I'll get to that a little bit more in a few minutes. So if either the county or even one city within the county levies a property tax do not have a floating homestead exemption, either created by this bill or a pre-existing one, then the county and all cities within the county are disqualified from the FLOSS. So there's another little weird wrinkle in this law. The little caveat is that the Walton County Board of Commissioners actually has a stronger exemption in place. They have a fixed exemption rather than a floating exemption. So the law allows them to opt out and not affect the rest of what the cities are doing. As you know, we're in our second of 3 public hearings that are required. If you don't opt out, you're automatically opted in. And this has to be done by March 1st of this year. Now, one thing I want to be clear on is this does not mean that taxes are automatically increased if we opt out. That's any jurisdiction that chooses to opt out. Millage rates are the ultimate control for what your taxes will be. So, if the council wants to roll their taxes back next year, absolutely they can. There's nothing that precludes them from doing so in this bill if the city opts out. And again, this has no effect on existing senior school tax exemptions. So it's totally separate from those existing exemptions. Again, this FLOSS would have to be imposed on a secondary referendum. Subsequent to that, if passed, we have to create an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, with Walton County and all the other cities. And the county, as you know, has greater control on what that percentage split will be. There is non-binding arbitration. That is gone. That was the old days of sales tax laws, where we would negotiate, and if we couldn't reach consensus, there would be a binding arbitration. So now we're in non-binding arbitration format. So we don't really have the leverage that the county has when we enter into these agreements. If a FLOSS is not approved and the cities opt in, there will be immediate losses to the tax base. So then we have to start thinking about our levels of service. So if we're not able to recoup it from the sales tax, then what cuts do we make? Or are you going to raise the millage rate? So those are the big choices that you will all have to face and confront in the future. And again, the school systems, they opted out because they could not participate in FLOSS. I apologize, I thought I was hitting it. There we go. So this bill has a lot of ramifications regarding local control, right? So when we think about the ability to control your destiny, we're kind of limited in the fact that we don't get to assess properties. We just get what is handed to us from the tax assessor. And then we have a series of procedures that we have to go through regarding sales tax rollbacks, abiding by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights Act, which we have to do, public hearings if we're going to go above the rollback, several things like that. So if we opt into this, we are ceding a little bit more local control to the state legislature. So basically, they've thrown that big blanket over us. So what all does this mean in real dollars and cents? So Monroe's initial cost would be approximately $51,000 in year one. It's not a huge impact to us. It would increase each year as the market conditions change, but over a decade or so, it could equal hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, easily. The tax loss burdens would shift to things like rental properties, commercial properties, small mom and pop businesses over time that you have this inequity of taxation. City councils of the future will be placed in really precarious positions to raise the millage rate each year or change those service levels. That's just going to be a reality everyone's going to have to face over the long term. Then over time, you got to think about this too, the tax inequity of home values within your own neighborhood, for instance. So let's say 20 years in the future, a home value may have moved up a maximum of 3% or less per year, meaning that the longer term homeowners may end up paying far less in tax than the newcomers who just bought down the street. So you may have paid $250,000 for your home. 20 years in the future, your neighbor may have paid $1 million, and your tax inequality is just going to be really out of sync, whereby you may use the same amount of city services, okay? One other caveat that we thought through with this bill was future borrowing costs for infrastructure over time may become a little bit more expensive. So when we're rated by the agencies out of New York, like a Moody's or Standard & Poor's, they look at how easy it is for you as councils to actually move the millage rate a little bit to cover any necessary debt service requirements. And anything like this that is going to cede some level of control back to the state or create arbitrary caps on assessments will probably be a red flag to some of these ratings agencies. And if that's the case, let's say we're going out to market in another year or so for a major infrastructure project, they may move those rating notches down a little bit, which in turn raises interest rates a little bit to prospective buyers. So this is just one of those could-be situations. And again, opting in is a decision that permanently cedes some of this taxing authority to the state rules, and you don't get it back. It's basically underlined within the bill that this is permanent. Once you're in, you've ceded this control to the new state law permanently. So here's a little bit of a look back. I know it's kind of hard to see there. If House Bill 581 was in effect beginning in 2021, and we were capped at the 3% level on homesteaded properties, the loss in total revenue would have been $1,886,922. And this is information from the county tax assessors. I tried to quantify that previously and say, hey, this is equivalent to one of our major general fund departments, like a streets department, for instance. So we hear you. We know the bill or the referendum passed here locally. So what can we do that keeps some local control on the issue, but also creates the intent or matches the spirit of the law? And we think that we could probably introduce through local legislation a Monroe-specific homestead exemption. So, for example, we could create a $5,000 homestead exemption for any qualified homeowner, and this would actually cost a little bit more in year one than HB 581, but it wouldn't compound the revenue losses year over year with that sliding, 3% max cap. So, year one, it would cost us about $65,000 based on the current pool of homesteaded properties. And this also keeps your local control. Again, you all can see how the market is shifting, and if it needs to be moved up to 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 over the coming years, you can do that easily. And that'll keep things moving for the homeowner, and it'll also be fair to the city because we can project that. We know what those revenues will be. We can adjust our service level expectations a little more easily without having to rely on really a third party, which is the county appraiser, to see what may happen. Multiple third parties, because we're using CPI as another basis, right? So there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar to dictate our revenues. And it's been discussed before that there could be future legislation that could address the mess that's been created by HB 581. There's no guarantee, but of course, it's just been so confusing with this patchwork of examples across the state of Georgia and how all this works together. So we've seen, 80 some odd percent, I guess was the last survey I saw, of local jurisdictions opt out, and a lot of them opted out for various reasons. Some that have opted in for a multitude of various reasons. Local government is not a one-size-fits-all, and so that's kind of really the tone of the opt-out decisions around the state. That's about all I've got for you tonight. If you have any questions, please let me know. I know I kind of went through things a little quickly.
Logan, a couple things. One, when we talk about arbitration, baseball arbitration was the way the local option sales tax used to be agreed upon between the city and the county. And what that means is we would go in with what we thought was fair. The county would go in with what they wanted. And the person in the middle, the arbitrator, would say, this is the one that's more realistic. It's not that he takes an average of the two. That's why we always try to put our best, what we really thought was fair, together. So it's not mediation as much as arbitration. So when that was declared unconstitutional a couple of years ago, the county had the upper hand, and that's the way it sits at this particular moment. We're trying to renegotiate that with GMA and ACCG right now. So that's off the table. That's the number one fear. And the number two fear is a total, I think, overreach of our home rule. So the option on going with our proposed local homestead exemption is going to be something that's done next. Now, that being said, are there any questions for Mr. Probst?
I did want to make one other.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
It's about your alternative proposal.
Mhm.
Have we run a 5 and 10 year scenario to see kind of how much money this is costing? Because obviously, if you take any money out of the general fund, you've got to replace it somewhere down the line.
So, you know, in that first year, it's around $60,000. It really depends on how many new homesteaded homes come online, right? So it's really going to be hard to say exactly how much it is, but it won't vary very much from year to year. So your 60,000 is probably going to be around 60 to 65,000 each year. You know, it may creep up a percentage or two.
So is that compounding every year?
No,
It's just
that flat amount, and then as markets change, you guys can always increase that amount.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like a compounding to where, you know, you get up to that $1 million at
Right.
one point in time.
No, it's probably the most conservative way to do it. That also gives the benefit of a homestead exemption.
Love to give benefits. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that we're not having to reach back another in 5 years and trying to replace the money that we're losing.
And that's the real issue with the state's bill is.
Right, they are
It
compounding.
is permanent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
I was just going to note too that, you know, everybody says, you know, our tax digest has gone up. Indeed, it has. We've had a lot of new growth, non-inflationary growth added to the digest. And what we do when we levy the millage rates is traditionally do a rollback. I think only 2 out of the last 30 years maybe we have not done that. So what we do is we take the average increase and roll it back. Now, some people still may pay a little more based on the assessments of their homes, and that's because of how the property appraisers do their, you know, 3-year tour of homes and will reassess there, and that's out of our hands, but we operate on the law of averages, and so I think this council's been very cognizant over the years to try to be as diligent with that millage rate as possible.
And also want to follow up that we do have the lowest millage rate in the county of municipalities. No more questions? That being said, we'll open this for public comment. I'll declare this portion of the meeting open for anyone who'd like to speak in favor of our opting out of this House bill. Hearing none, is there anyone who would like to speak against our opting out of this House Bill 581? Thank you for your attention. I'll declare that portion of the meeting closed, and we will revisit again at our next public hearing, which will be
On the 20th at 6 p.m.
on the 20th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn by Mr. Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Crawford. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Meeting carried, motion adjourned.